I served in the Mississippi Jackson mission from January 2nd of 2013 to December 29th. No, December 31st, excuse me, of 2014. So just a few days short. But so from 2013 to basically 2015 is when I served. And I started in Ruston, Louisiana. I was there for 4 months. And then I went to Ocean Springs, Mississippi, down on the coast. My mission kind of bounced back and forth as far as areas are concerned. So I went from Ruston, Louisiana, down to Ocean Springs, Mississippi. I was there for 4 months. And then I went up to the Stonewall Ward in Louisiana, which is just south of Shreveport. I was there for about 4 months, 3 transfers. I was in all my areas for 3 transfers, for the most part. I was in Stonewall for 3 transfers. Then I went to Bastrop, Louisiana. No, I went to Wiggins, Mississippi. We got some funky names out there in Mississippi. So it's great. It's kind of a quirky place, but you fall in love with it and you never want to leave. I went to Wiggins, Mississippi. I was there for 3 transfers for just about 4 months. Then I went to Bastrop, Louisiana. I was there for 2 transfers. And then I went to Brandon, Mississippi, which is right by just east of Jackson, Mississippi, to the Brandon Ward. Interesting things about the mission. It's, like I said, it's hot and humid in the summer. I mean, it's humid all around, but because it's humid, like, it gets hot and nasty and sweaty in the summer. So you're knocking doors and you're just, it's kind of fun because you're knocking doors and then people are like, oh, I'm not interested, but do you want some water? Or like, I'll give you some. Just genuine Christian people in the South. Like, that's one, I really learned the definition of a Christian when I was serving in the Mississippi Jackson mission. And just, there were so many genuine people I met. It was cool to experience because of that. And there's just so many great people. It's hot, but it's fine. It makes you feel like you're melting. And I never thought my shin bones could sweat, but they sweat, apparently. It's pretty spread out, but it's growing in the South. If you're in a ward, it's generally a small ward. It depends on the area. There are some big wards. And there are also a lot of branches. I served in a couple branches. There's big branches and tiny branches. There's branches where there's only 20, 30 people in church each week, if that. There's branches that have 60 people each week. And then there's wards that have 90 to 100 people each week. Then there's wards that have 150 people each week. Like, it's a pretty spread out area and mission. The mission covers 4 states. It's the top half of Louisiana, bottom 2/3 of Mississippi, and then a little sliver of Arkansas and a corner of Texas. That's what it was when I was there. And so it's a pretty broad mission. I think it took about, my mission president said it takes about 7-8 hours to get across the mission driving. It's not the biggest mission in the world, but I mean, it's definitely one of the larger missions. When I was in Ocean Springs, my second area, a lot of people worked at the Chevron plant right down, kind of over Pascagoula, Mississippi, which is just right in between. It's kind of right almost to Florida, the Florida line, which is, because Ocean Springs, it's pretty close. You're about half an hour away from, or I think you're about halfway. I don't know. It's right on the corner of the mission. A lot of people work just a couple towns over, like a Chevron plant, a Chevron refinery. I can't remember what it's there. The shipyard down there where they build ships. It's pretty spread out. There's one area where a lot of the people are military people. Like, you got Keesler Air Force Base down in Gulfport, Mississippi on the Gulf. In Shreveport, you kind of got another Air Force base up there that people work at and stuff, depending on like members. And so some areas are pretty young and they switch out pretty quick just because of that military families, and they just kind of go wherever. But then you, like, some areas, like small branches. When I was in Bastrop, there's the paper mill. The paper mill used to be in Bastrop, then there's another one up in Crossett, Arkansas. So there's a lot of different places. A lot of it is, there's a lot of paper mills down there. Especially like Louisiana, Arkansas area, just because there's so many trees, and that's kind of a big thing. And yeah, I think most people you talk to, like especially in Louisiana, there's paper mills. They're notorious paper mills. They stink. It smells like the chemicals they use it just smells funky. But then there's like college campuses in a lot of the areas that some people work at, like professors and different things. But as far as the predominant religions there, it's definitely You got Baptist, Methodist, you got a few Catholics, but like I said, it depends on the area. Some are higher than others, but Baptists are probably the highest. Methodists are up there. And every once in a while you run into some atheists. And those are always interesting. An atheist in the South is like, they're not very common, but when you do find them it's usually because they tried to find God and they couldn't, so they turned away. Which you may run into sometimes, but it's not they couldn't find God, of course. You know that. But yeah, I mean, you got a lot of Baptists, a lot of Methodists, and just all sorts of religions. I mean, it's the Bible Belt, but I had a mission companion. He's like, they don't read the Bible. They just call it the church belt. I'm like, okay, well, I mean, they read the Bible, but there's just so many churches. The point is, there's just a ton of churches, like every corner. Like just as there are LDS churches here in Utah, or even more than that, you got a Baptist, Methodist. Sometimes you've got Baptist church, Methodist church, Catholic church, like on corners or within a block, you've got 3-4 churches, and some are huge. There's this one area in Oak Grove, Mississippi. You ask anyone, they'll know. Ask them about Temple Baptist in Purvis, Mississippi, and it is massive. Like you look at what's a big building here. It's not as big as some of the temples, but it's bigger than a lot of the small temples. It's big. Like it is definite like concert hall status, and I've never been in there, but it's a big place. There's a lot of big churches. There's a lot of little tiny churches too. But it's a tough mission. I'll just be real. I mean, it's a tough mission regarding that. I mean, there's a lot of religions. In theory, you're like, it should be one of the easiest missions because they already have a testimony of Jesus Christ, which is true to an extent. I mean, it definitely makes it a lot different than if they had no Christian background. So it's nice to talk to people and you can connect on them in that way. But if you're not careful, you can find yourself getting in just a moving Bible study type mission setting, or you just a walking Bible study, like we can just read with them, which is why it's so important to involve the Book of Mormon in your teaching.